I'm Tim Tuller, canon for music at St. John's Cathedral. I'm going to say a couple words about the music for this Sunday. We're now into the second Sunday in Lent, and Lent is overall a very rich time for music in the church. Lent and Advent tend to be two seasons that are full of particularly rich music for both choir and organ that is accumulated into the repertoire over the centuries. Our prelude this Sunday is by Johannes Brahms, and it's the prelude and fugue on O Traurigkeit, O Herzeleid, which is a German chorale or hymn tune, and it's associated with Lent, and it's usually translated into English as O Sadness, O Heart Sorrow. Brahms was not an organist himself. However, he did write a handful of pieces for organ. Interestingly, they tend to come either from the very early part of his career or at the very end of his career. Brahms, unlike many musicians and composers in the 19th century, was very aware of and interested in the music of earlier centuries. This was not common at the time. And Brahms was deeply interested in the music of J.S. Bach, Heinrich Schütz, Sweelinck, many composers of earlier generations that really weren't on the radar screen of most composers of his time. And Brahms' interest in choral preludes really shows the influence specifically of J.S. Bach and Buxtehude and German composers before him. And some of these were actually written as student pieces to kind of show off his compositional skills. And this particular prelude and fugue, it starts out, the prelude portion is just a simple statement of the theme over a light accompaniment in the left-handed pedal. And then the second part of it, the fugue, is what we call a cantus firmus fugue. Now what that means, a cantus firmus piece is simply a composition that's based on a pre-existing tune. And usually the tune will be audible if you know where to listen for it. And in this particular fugue, you will hear the actual chorale tune itself played in long drawn-out notes in the pedal against some manual figurations. Now the tune that this is based on actually does appear in our hymnal 1982, but it's basically completely unknown to any Episcopal congregation I've ever been familiar with. I've certainly never done it in any church I've been at, and I've never heard it done in America. But it goes like this. O sorrow deep, who would not weep with heartfelt pain and sighing? So this is what the choral prelude and fugue is based on. Our offertory anthem this week is Draw Nigh to God by the 19th century British composer Basil Harwood. Harwood is not one of the big names that you see frequently on our programs like Stanford and Perry and people like that, but he was very important. He wrote a handful of pieces that are still very well loved in the Anglican world. Harwood was the organist at Ely Cathedral from 1887 to 1892, and after that he moved on to Christ Church, Oxford, where he was from 1892 until his retirement in 1909. He was a fantastic organist, and Draw Nigh to God uses an alto solo, alternating with a full choral texture throughout the course of the piece. So it starts out with alto solo, then the choir comes in, and then we alternate between the alto solo and the full choir sections. It's a wonderfully moving piece, and it really shows what a wonderful organist Harwood must have been, because the accompaniment makes it very clear that the composer was intimately familiar with organs and how they should be written for and how they should be used. He really shows off the organ to full effect in this piece. Our postlude is another choral prelude, this one by J.S. Bach, and it's like the Brahms I mentioned earlier for the prelude. It's a chorale that's usually probably not going to be well known by many American ears. And the German title is Christus, der uns selig macht, which literally translates as Christ who makes us blessed. It's from Bach's collection, the Orgelbuchlein, which I've mentioned before. and which is a series of choral preludes written to cover the various liturgical seasons of the church year. And this particular chorale goes like this. And the words translate to, "See the Lord of light and life, Savior meek and lowly, taken like a thief at night, bound by hands unholy." And how Bach treats this piece is he takes the chorale tune and he treats it like a canon. And what that means is the chorale tune starts in one voice and then is echoed in another voice. In this case, he does it between the right hand and the pedal. So if you listen carefully, you can hear the tune starting out in the right hand, and then you'll hear it come in the pedal 2 beats later. And so on. So the chorale tune is stated, and then it comes in a couple beats later in the pedal, and that carries on throughout the course of the piece. The piece is also filled with a lot of chromatic harmonies, half steps, which in the music of Bach and most composers around that time almost always represents sorrow, pathos, grief, and things like that. So you see a lot of that in his Lenten pieces. I hope you enjoy the music this Sunday.